So, brethren, it's a pleasure being here once again. And today, I want to ask a question, and that will be followed with the answers to the question being asked. So, the question is going to be surrounding, in light of the superiority of the grace of God, the law of God, the following questions are in order. Why and to what was the law of first covenant added, as is indicated in Galatians chapter 3, verse 19? What status did its beneficiaries enjoy, and what purpose does it now serve? So, the question I'm asking today, brethren, is to what and why was the law added? Now, all scriptures will be read from the King James Version Bible only, and I do hope on your free time that you'll be able to reread the scriptures on your own time to confirm what is it that I will be saying today. So, brethren, I'll start. Now, with respect to the question, to what was the law added, one must first confront the reality that if the law of first covenants was indeed added, as can be seen from Galatians chapter 3, verse 19, there must have been something existing before the law, to which the law was subsequently added. Once this is understood, the inferiority of the law of God to the grace of God becomes apparent indeed. From what I just shared, those established foundation, therefore, I am pleased to declare that the law was added to the Abrahamic promise and covenant, which was a promise and covenant of grace, recorded for us in Genesis chapter 12, verse 7, Genesis chapter 15, verse 7, and Genesis chapter, well, the same chapter 15, you go to verse 18. So I repeat, Genesis chapter 12, verse 7, Genesis 15, verse 7, and verse 18. Now, for those who will choose to challenge this fact, I will simply direct the seeker of truth to Romans chapter 4, verse 13 and 16. From this Romans text, therefore, we know that the word promise was the Old Testament word for grace. From our studies so far, it must be recognized that the law of God of first covenant has a limited role in the plan of God today. For the grace of God, which is by the new and better covenant of the grace of God, has now superseded the law in status and scope. This fact finds scriptural confirmation in Hebrews chapter 8, verses 6 to 9 and verse 13. In addition to Romans chapter 7, verses 1 to 7, or 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 6 to 13, if you would but believe the clear teaching of the New Testament. Moreover, from the scriptural evidence shared, therefore, we are sure that the law of first covenant was added to the Abrahamic promise and covenant until the seed, Jesus Christ, to whom the promise was made, as Galatians chapter 3, verse 16 states, was manifested in Galatians chapter 2, verse 19. Having answered the part of the question, to what was the law added? That is the question. I must proceed to treat with the next part of the question, namely, and the question that I've asked prior, why was it necessary to add the law of first covenant to the Abrahamic promise and covenant? Now, when one understands that the Abrahamic promise and covenant was based upon God's ability and integrity to deliver what he had promised, and that God only covenanted with Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, verse 18, after Abraham had just displayed absolute trust in God's ability and integrity to make good his promise to make Abraham's descendants as the stars of heaven, as Genesis chapter 15, verse 6 states. Moreover, brethren, when one considers the fact that Abraham's faith in God's ability and integrity was credited to him as his righteousness, as Genesis chapter 15, verse 6 states, one is entering upon the threshold of understanding the ways of God. From Genesis chapter 15, verse 18. Therefore, we know that the land of Palestine was covenanted to Abraham's descendants based solely upon God's ability to deliver what he had promised, as the following text shows. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. That's Genesis chapter 15, verse 18. With this information in one's archives, one stumbles on Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 to 13, and lo, one sees that the said covenant to give the land of Palestine to Abraham and his descendants was now repeated with a significant addition included. And the question I'm asking you, brethren, what was this addition? And what was so significant about this addition? By comparing Genesis chapter 15, verse 18 with Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 to 13, we see that circumcision of the flesh was added to the original covenant given in Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 to 21. Now, a question is in order again, brethren, and that question is this. Why was it necessary for God to add circumcision of the flesh to his original Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 to 21 covenant? Brethren and online listeners, I humbly declare to you that circumcision of the flesh became necessary because Abraham stumbled in his walk with God by yielding to Sarah's advice to go in unto Hagar. Hence, the walk before me and be thou perfect, and I will make my covenant between me and thee. That's Genesis chapter 17, 1c to 2a. Proof of this can be had by reading Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 to 3. Now, the big question is this. How is that covenant of circumcision being added related to the law being added? How? I just spoke of I just spoke of that. I just spoke on that covenant, and I'm asking, how is it that that covenant of circumcision being added related to the law being added? And the answer is, this is how it is related. Remember that God had already promised the land of Palestine to Abraham's blood descendants by three previous promises in Genesis chapter 12, verse 7, Genesis chapter 13, verses 14 to 17, and Genesis chapter 15, verse 7, and later on my covenant in Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 to 21. This being the case, there was no need for another covenant to have been given to the children of Israel for them to access their forefathers' inheritance. Remembering also that the original covenant of Genesis 15, verses 18 to 21, was predicated upon God's ability to deliver, with Abraham's only requirement being his willingness to trust God to deliver. We look at Israel's deliverance from Egyptian bondage and their sojourn in the wilderness, and immediately one can see the most blatant examples of Israel's mistrust in God's ability to deliver and to provide for the deliverer. To be specific, let us consider Israel's predicament in Egypt. Accordingly, we saw them sighing, crying, and groaning under Pharaoh's tyranny, as Exodus chapter 2, verse 23 states. Then we observe God's commitment to deliver them, based upon his prior covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as Exodus chapter 2, verses 24 to 25 states. So, from that perspective that I just shared, therefore, we see God coming to Israel's defense in Exodus chapter 14, in the Red Sea. After God's intervention at the Red Sea, one would have expected Israel as a nation to trust God absolutely. With this, you should agree. But this was not to be. For no sooner had they escaped Pharaoh's bondage and impending massacre at the Red Sea than they began to doubt God's ability and integrity to provide them with water, as can be seen by the following. So I'm reading Exodus chapter 15, verses 23 to 25. All right, brethren, can you hold 1 second for me, please? I return shortly. Sorry for this inconvenience. Brethren, my apologies for taking so long to return to this segment. I do apologize for that. I had to step away a bit to attend to something, and I'm back. Right? So, where I had stopped off, brethren, if I repeat, I do apologize for that again. Right? So, I had indicated. Now, the big question is this: how is the covenant of circumcision being added related to the law being added? This is how it is related. Remember that God had already promised the land of Palestine to Abraham's blood descendants by three previous promises in Genesis chapter 12, verse 7, Genesis chapter 13, verses 14 to 17, and Genesis chapter 15, verse 7, and later on by covenant in Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 to 21. This being the case, there was no need for another covenant to have been given to the children of Israel for them to access their forefathers' inheritance. Remembering also that the original covenant of Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 to 21, was predicated upon God's ability to deliver, with Abraham's only requirement being his willingness to trust God to deliver. We look at Israel's deliverance from Egyptian bondage and their sojourn in the wilderness, and immediately one can see the most blatant examples of Israel's mistrust in God's ability to deliver and to provide for the delivered. To be specific, let us consider Israel's predicament in Egypt. Accordingly, we saw them sighing, we saw them crying and groaning under Pharaoh's tyranny. One can read Exodus chapter 2, verse 23 if in doubt. Then we observe God's commitment to deliver them based upon his prior covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as Exodus chapter 2, verses 24 to 25 states. From that perspective, therefore, we see God coming to Israel's defense in Exodus chapter 14 in the Red Sea. After God's intervention at the Red Sea, one would have expected Israel as a nation to trust God absolutely. With this, you should agree. But this was not to be. For no sooner had they escaped Pharaoh's bondage and impending massacre at the Red Sea than they began to doubt God's ability and integrity to provide them with water, as can be seen by the following. So I'm reading Exodus chapter 15, verses 23 to 25. It states, "And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter." Verse 24, "And the people murmured against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he had cast into the waters were made sweet." So that's Exodus chapter 15, verses 23 to 25. Surely, one would expect that after that incident that I just shared, the children of Israel would have understood that God was able not only to deliver, but also to provide for their needs under any condition. But this was not to be, as the following excerpt indicates. And I'm reading Exodus chapter 16, verses 1 to 3, and then I'm going to verse 8, which states, verse 1, "And they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came unto the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt." Verse 2, "And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness." Verse 3, "And the children of Israel said unto them, Would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into this wilderness, to kill this whole assembly with hunger And verse 8, for that the Lord heareth your murmurings which ye murmur against him. Your murmurings are not against us, but against the Lord. That's Exodus chapter 16, verses 1 to 3 and verse 8. Now, brethren, can you imagine the grief that Israel caused God by their blatant display of lack of trust in him? That is my question to you. Can you imagine the grief that Israel caused God by their blatant display of their lack of trust in him? By this time, God's anger started to kindle against his people, and to show his displeasure, he gave them excess quails for their lust for flesh and Sabbath keeping as a result of their mistrust. That's Exodus chapter 16, verses 1 to 28. Now, it is instructive to note that in the said week that Sabbath keeping was given to Israel as an ordinance, it was broken on the very day after it was given. This fact, the following quote surely substantiates, and I'm reading Exodus chapter 16, verses 23, verse 25, and I'm going to verse 27 to 28, and it states, verse 23, and meaning Moses said unto them, this is that which the Lord hath said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which you will bake today, and seek that you will seek, and that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. And Moses said, verse 25, eat that today, for today is a Sabbath unto the Lord. Today ye shall not find it in the field. Verse 27, and it came to pass that there went out some of the people on the seventh day for to gather, and they found none. Verse 28, and the Lord said unto Moses, how long refuse ye to keep my commandments and my laws? And that is Exodus chapter 16, verses 23, 25, and 27 to 28. From Exodus chapter 15, verses 23 to 25, from Exodus chapter 16, verses 1 to 8, and 23 to 28, we saw that the Sabbath was given to Israel after their gross display of mistrust in God. So, what I just read described the behavior of Israel. It explains the reason for the remember, Remember, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Now, what I would like you to do, brethren, is read Exodus chapter 17, verses 1 to 7 on your own free time. And see the provocation that God had to endure. And the following highlights. And all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin. After their journeys, according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. Verse 2. Wherefore the people did chide with Moses, and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, why chide ye with me? Wherefore do ye tempt the Lord? Verse 3. And the people murmured against Moses, and said, wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt, to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? And Moses cried, this is verse 4, and Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, what shall I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me. So that was Exodus chapter 17, verses 1 to 4. Brethren, at this point, God intervened and told Moses to smite the rock to which he stood. He obeyed, and so miraculously gave Israel water to drink a second time. By this time, God's anger was at boiling point, as can be seen by the following. So I'm reading Exodus chapter 17, verse 7, which states, and he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the chiding of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? So that was Exodus chapter 17, verse 7. Surely, one would have expected that by this time the children of Israel would have learned to trust in their God. But this was not to be. For in Exodus chapter 18, verse 13, we saw Moses spending the entire day to judge the people. And had it not been for Jethro, a black Midian priest, who advised Moses to appoint judges and teach the people laws, Moses' life story could have ended other than it did. See Exodus chapter 18, verses 17 to 24, and can be convinced that this is even so. And be convinced, sorry, that this is even so. Brethren and online listeners, it was under those mentioned circumstances that the law, even the Ten Commandments, was given. Now, since the Ten Commandments did not have any forgiveness elements, it would have meant that any violation of any one of the ten would have resulted in the death of the offender. Because of this lack of mercy in the Ten Commandments, a priesthood had to be assigned to it to administer various aspects of forgiveness. Hence the need for and the establishment of the Levitical priesthood. So I would like you, brethren, on your own time to read Hebrews chapter 9, verse 1, then verses 2 to 10, and understand that the first covenant consisted of the Ten Commandments plus the ceremonial tabernacle worship at least. So, from those passages that I've just shared and the story outlined, therefore, it can be seen that the law of first covenant was added to the Abrahamic promise and covenant of Genesis chapter 12, verse 7, Genesis chapter 15, verse 7, and, and verse 18 in Genesis chapter 15. Because of Israel's transgressions, and that its jurisdiction is recorded in Galatians chapter 3, verse 19, as until the seed, meaning Christ, should come, to whom the promise was made. This being so, we know that it was not given in the Garden of Eden, nor to Abraham, Isaac, nor Jacob. This fact finds textual confirmation in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 1 to 21, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 8, and Galatians chapter 3, verse 17. I repeat, please read on your own free time Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 13, and Hebrews chapter 9, verses 1 to 10, and be convinced that the first covenant consisted initially of the Ten Commandments. Then, under the illumination of the Holy Ghost, understand that an integral part of the first covenant was the whole ceremonial tabernacle worship system, as Hebrews chapter 9, verse 1 states, and verses 2 to 10 states. This fact is further confirmed once you, brethren, read the following Old Testament text, and that is 2 Chronicles chapter 33, verse 8, Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 29. In closing, therefore, we know from the Bible that the law, even the Ten Commandments with its Levitical priesthood services, was added to the Abrahamic covenant of Genesis chapter 15, verses 18 to 21, and became necessary because of transgressions, especially Israel's, as Galatians chapter 3, verse 19 states, and was never given to give eternal life, as Galatians chapter 3, verse 21 states. In addition to this, the law was added to give Israel access to and staying rights in the promised land, as the following shows. So I'm reading Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 1, which states, Now therefore hearken, O Israel, unto the statutes and unto the judgments, which I teach you, for to do them, that ye may live, and go in and possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers giveth you. So that's Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 1. Read on your own time, brethren. I'm asking you to please read your holy Bibles. Read Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 1 for confirmation of my stated position. So as I come to an end, though I run the risk of being repetitious, I can state categorically that the law, even the Ten Commandments, with its ceremonial, dietary, and other imperatives, was added to the Abrahamic promises and the covenant recorded in Genesis chapters 12 through 15, and was divinely added to enable the children of Israel to access and remain in their land of promise. So, brethren, that's the end of my segment today. I will be live next week again, and that will be followed by another question that I have to ask, brethren, and then the answers would be given afterwards. So, brethren, please spend time and read your holy Bibles. Remember that Jesus Christ is returning and he will return soon. So, we need to prepare ourselves for his return. So, brethren, do have a safe and productive week. Remember that Jesus Christ loves you and I love you. So, bye for now.